So this is part of the reason why I haven't been posting a lot lately. Moving into and setting up and organizing this big shop. It's about 5,000 square feet. And I received my Langmuir Systems Crossfire Pro. So this has like 48 plus in the x-axis, 48 and a quarter, something like by 33 in the y. It's got the torch height controller, so it picks up and senses the material. Water table, which is already dirty, that's a good thing. And then I just got their little plasma cut razor weld to go with it. So I had to do some work with air, plumbing, and electrical and everything else. So, and taking a couple of cars apart and finishing some engines. So we're finally getting Pontiac back on the Pontiac, and I will show you that mount once I get it tacked together. So there we are. Got the side that goes against the frame, the passenger side. The side that goes across the cross frame, all ground and filed. So that hole there is where the bolt goes through. And this is for welding to the main frame. And then those are to the cross frame. The angle braces, they'll weld up onto the cross. So everything fits. We'll show you where it's going to go. And I'm happy with the fitment. And now I can make the second one for the other side. As you can see, this is the passenger side. That'll fit on there about like that. Flush with the top and the bottom. It'll get welded, through those holes and along here, top and bottom. Make it nice and strong. And then I'll put this piece on here after I weld it so that I can get to that top hole there, welding into the frame. And we'll drill it across after it's tacked in, and everything should work well. As you can see, it's a bit of a snug fit, but it fits on there just like it's supposed to. So we'll go and make the second one, get it ready for the driver's side. Now I got the driver's side done. So this was what I had in there, and this is what I'm putting in there. A little bit heavier, but I think it's going to be a lot stronger, and we'll also be able to triangulate the frame, which I'll show you here in a second. So we're on the passenger side now. And what I did was put this in here, clamped it in, and made this surface flush with the top. So I made this, I think it's 4 inches and 30 thousandths, but it's, the same height as this tube here. And I think the nice thing it's going to do is it's going to add some strength and triangulation into this joint here. So we'll also put, when we get it over to the other shop, we'll put another brace in here to make it just nice and strong, but I don't think he's going to tear it out. So what I'm going to do is just kind of tack this in place really good, and then when I move the get it on its wheels, move it over to the other shop, I've got a bigger welder over there, so I'll burn it in proper. Here we have it. So a little tack there, a little tack there, a little tack here, and 2 near the bottom, so that ought to hold it to just transport it on the trailer to the other shop. So we'll go ahead and do up the driver's side. So now we've got the driver's side, it's still hot, all tacked in. So I'm happy with that. I'll show you the holes, and we use a transfer punch, get under the car, transfer punch those holes, drill them through, and then I'll have to make a little window on the bottom side of this tube in order to get the nut on, but that's not a big deal. So we'll move on next to putting the bars in and redoing our lower mounts for the rear axle. So that'll be the next thing. We're back at it again today. So I designed this up this morning. This is the rear lower control arm mount, which also, so the control arm will mount in here once this is welded up. And it's also the coilover mount. Got it backwards, but anyway, we are going to tape this together and check all our measurements out, and the main thing I'm looking at is my shock distance from here up to the frame and make sure I got the angle correct, and so you're supposed to have this at a 10-degree angle in. So we'll tape that together and see what it looks like. So here we have our high-tech prototyping method, masking tape. So this is the QA1 coilover. It's about 2.5 inches too long now for ride height, but that's okay. This is just for mock-up. So that it'll sit in the slots there and give us our 10-degree angle door exit sun line. So in a sense, this will be for the driver's side. So I'm going to flip this over because I've been working on the passenger side, but I think that'll do for now. So we'll check and make sure the lower control arm mounts fits. So there's the lower control arm in. I'll just have to make some spacers up to make up that distance because I didn't want to go too narrow, just so we didn't have any moment issues, because this does hang down quite a bit. But very happy with that. Don't have to worry about anything hitting, and it's going to be very strong. And I'll probably, when I do the final one, I might put a plate up here just to give it that much more strength. So this is just for prototyping. You can use most of the pieces again, but we'll keep moving forward. Well, there you have it. That is one passenger side. You can see the tilt, 10-degree tilt. Shock mount, lower control arm mount. So I put the coilover in it. The only thing I'm worried about is straight up and down I only have about a 1/4 inch clearance here, so I've only get about probably 5 degrees of movement. So I might move these holes out just a little bit. But again, this is just a prototype, and that's what I want to learn from this. So now I got to take the old mounts off and kind of put this in place, and we'll see how this sits, because this lower control arm has got to be about 1/2 degree angled up with everything at ride height. So I want to check that. Well, there we have everything mocked in place using the universal blocking method of whatever you have. But the coilover is at 8 degrees. It's tilted a little bit forward. It's leaning on the front axle. But up top, yeah, we're hitting right now, but that's got to come down about 2 inches, I think, for ride height. And the coilover right now is right about 10 degrees leaned in. So now I can get my measurements and start designing up upper shock mounts. But I still think I'm gonna do some calculations of what how much the this bracket here will actually swing, and see if I need to move these lower out just a touch more. But besides that, I'm pretty happy, and this looks really cool. So I just finished cutting out and cleaning up and tacking together the upper shock mount that I'm going to try. So what I wanted to do was check to make sure we had enough clearance. So we got a good finger width in there. Same thing on that side, and that's pretty much how it'll be in the car. Well, that right there will make a guy happy. So I was shooting from 14 inches from the eyelet to eyelet on the shock. So I am approximately 14 inches from eyelet to eyelet on the shock. And 80 degrees, so in a sense you can kind of see these are tilted in 10 degrees. And we're at 79.9, so I think in my world that's close enough. Now I do think I'm going to, I have moved the eyelets back for the lower shock mount. So I think I might have to do some hand prepping in here because we're going to get close to that angle. But I think that'll work. So now we'll get this welded up and make 2 sets of lowers and 1 more set of upper shock mounts. And all we'll have to do next is that piece there. So, after about a week's worth of work, trying and analyzing and changing, and this is revision 3 for the lower control arm rear mounts to the rear axle. I raised this point up, so now the lower control arm is at half a degree down in the back. The shock mounts give us 14 inches, which is the recommended for the particular coilover that I bought. I'll have to show it to you in the next clip, but everything is now locked down in here with this bolt. It's not through, but for the location. So I've gone through and leveled up the body, made sure everything was straight, got the rear axle straight, and tilted it the right degree, and centered in the car. So doing that, if I measure from the outside on the mounting flange to the surface, we're exactly the same side to side. And measuring diagonals from the center line here to the upper control arm, front control arm mounts are also the same. So now I have to do a little bit of redesign on the upper shock mount. I've got to move it out a little bit to get back to my 10 degrees, because right now we're about 14 degrees. Because moving this up, of course, changes your angle. So we'll do a little bit of that, and I'll show you more once I get those done. So there we have it. We have the lower control arm mount for the rear to the rear axle, the new shock mounts for the lower. So I moved this up, that pivot point up, so that the lower control arm was now at half a degree down. So it's a little bit lower here than it is in the front. And I moved the shock mount up so that I could get the travel that I wanted. And I've got the shock mount revision 4, I think. That's all done, clamped in place. So I'm happy with the design so far. Everything's working out exactly how I wanted. Of course, gonna have to do a couple revisions, and I'm learning my plasma table. Now the last thing I need to do, those were just prototypes I made from steel by hand. So I'm going to take some measurements off from there now that everything is where it's supposed to be. And we will do a final on the upper control arm front mount. I'm pretty happy with the rear mount, so I'll just box those in manually. Make that up in the front, and we'll be ready to go. So this is the upper shock mount. You can kind of see how I've got it all braced in. Got plates on top, a plate on the bottom. They're not welded in. Of course, they're just held on with a clamp right now. Planning on getting everything done, make sure it's exactly where I want it. Then I'll take everything off, clean it up, finish weld it, and tack it to the frame. So I've been working on the upper control arm mounts for the last couple days, just kind of cutting and fitting and making prototypes. So I think I'm pretty happy with these right now. So I've made new lower plates that will plug weld in and to the frame on the passenger side. And the mounts themselves, those are just held together right now with a bolt. So they're all tabbed and slotted to fit in. And I'll show you a little bit better of the rear ones that are in place. So I haven't measured the angle yet. I'm shooting for 60 degrees. So everything was designed that way. But I've got everything leveled. I've got my angle that I want for the upper control arm down about 5.5, 6 degrees. So it's lower in the front. So I'm pretty happy with it so far. So right now it's just cutting and fitting and getting everything set where I want. Don't take everything apart and weld it up, clean it up. So these are the rear mounts. As you can see, they fit in around the axle. That's what's really cool about having this CNC plasma cutter now, is you can make cool things like that and
Just have to do a little bit of fitting in here because, of course, the Z-axis doesn't tilt, but that's just about 2 minutes of grinding. And I've made pockets so I can weld here together, but they're still all tabbed in. So I'm very happy with those. You can see that's the rear view. This is the top view. So I made a nice little V cutout so we can get to the grease fitting. And the nice thing about this is I made everything square so that when the frame and the body is square, I can use this top edge in 2 directions to make sure everything's flat and square, because I tried to put the center of the pivot point on the Johnny joint on the center of the axle. So if everything's centered, everything's level, it will be correct. So this is where we're at. It's been a couple hours measuring everything, so I had to measure the width of the lowers, so those are parallel. Measure the uppers, make sure that they're at the right angle, they're within a tenth or two of a degree of each other, and they're within about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch here. I think this bar is back, so this bar here is back about 1/8 of an inch, which affects that lower mount. So it's not perfectly 90, but it's like 88.9 or something like that. So we're within a degree. Got my shocks back on. Got the upper mounts located. And I went back and made sure the rear end is perfectly centered on the string lines here. So it's perfectly centered side to side, and the housing is centered on the center line of that drop string. So I'm very happy with that right now. So what I'm going to do is take a few more measurements and take everything apart, start cleaning it up, start doing some initial welding, and then we'll put it all back together and do some tacking to the frame and make sure everything's right, and then we'll tack it good and sturdy, and then we'll take it over to the new shop, put some axles in it, take it over to the new shop, and use a bigger welder on it. So everything fitting the way I want now. Got all my angles correct and all my dimensions correct, so as close as I can get them. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, so got everything cleaned up. The front upper control arm mounts, shock mounts, the axle mounts for the upper arm to the rear axle, and the rear lower control arm mounts. So I'm going to go ahead and do all the finish welding on these that I can do before I put them on the car, and then we'll get them all ground up, looking pretty, and then we'll get them ready to mount on the Pontiac. I got the first pass on the welding all done. Just did little spots, moving around on different pieces at different times, just trying to keep everything from warping up very much. I'll probably grind everything and then come back and fill these little gaps where the locking positions were, but let them cool down over lunch and check to make sure everything still fits, which it does. Got welded, probably won't be able, there you go, the tabs on the back for the shock mounts, so I wanted to weld those. Now this second pass I'll probably come in here and weld here, but quite happy with that. So we'll keep moving forward and grind them down and get me a new 60 grit wheel, start cleaning up the welds. Feels like forever since I picked up this video camera. So I've spent basically almost a week trying to get everything square so the numbers add up. So I finally got that done, and what I had to do was basically strip everything out, find the exact center of the car. So I used 5, I think, plumb bobs down through the center of the car just so I could find a good average, because you know everything is kind of made and been cut apart. But we got that all done. The next hardest part I had was finding the center
make everything run square. So the rear end was centered in the tubs from side to side, wheel wells. So we've got that all done. And we've got our, as you can see, our wheelbase. So the passenger side is like an 1/8 inch shorter, but it's still the 97 inches that we should have for the car. So that means it must have done something right, because the driver's side is exactly 97 inches. It's 96 and 7/8 I think on the passenger side, which is no big deal. So I got the rear end housing set at 3 degrees up, and I've gone through and solidly tacked everything in place. All the bars are the correct length for each other. The top bar dimension from the rear end housing to the center line of the pivot point is 75% of the total length of the lower bars. The lower bars are parallel. So getting everything to fit right was, just trimming and cutting and grinding. And I had to remake the lower mount on the passenger side, move it back 1/4 inch, because I didn't get this part of the bar perfectly square to that part of the bar. But everything else has worked good. So we even got these coilover mounts welded on. So what I think I'm going to do now is put a jack under it, and for the first time in its life, have a rear end hanging from it. Probably almost 3 years now, but hey, work on it part-time, it takes a while. So I've got everything together. So yeah, there's anti-seize all over the coilovers, but that's a good thing. I'm supposed to put it between the aluminum body threads and the aluminum spanners, and then I just kind of covered everything with it accidentally, of course, in my hands. But there it is all together. It's hanging on the coilovers. Got a tiny gap between the rear end pumpkin and the jack, and everything seems to be holding. So I'll run around now and check the clearance between the coil springs and the rear end. So that is the biggest concern I was concerned about, is making sure I had enough room here, which is probably a 1/2 inch, about an indent knuckle worth. So that all looks good. Everything clears, everything's at the right angles. So now what we'll do is check the pinion angle. So I checked the pinion angle with it all the way, almost all the way up, and it went from 3 degrees of ride height to 2. And I'm suspecting it should be around 5 right now, but it's never going to really be there, because this is with it up on jack stands. So just like I was hoping for, sitting on the coilovers, the rear end pumpkin is at 5 degrees up, which will be fine for the universal joints, because that's at full drop. Anything more than that, you'll probably pull the drive shaft and the coilovers off anyway. So that all looks good. Doesn't look like we have any interference up here. There's the shock mounts. Bad camera work because of light, but I'm quite happy with that. So now we got to cut this bar out. Don't need that anymore. So everything is just tacked in good and solid till I get it on its wheels. So in order to do that, I'll have to go order the axles. So on to that next task. So we got all the new front suspension control arms on. Uppers and lowers, you can buy those complete, so those are just the factory replacements. They're inexpensive with new ball joints and stuff. It's cheaper to do that than try to put bushings and ball joints in. We can upgrade in the future for some fancy stuff. You can see here for some reason this passenger side front wheel is about 3/8 of an inch back. So all I can figure is I've done all kinds of measuring, and the front subframe is square and level and everything else, so I think it might have had a little tap at some time. So we'll see how it runs, but I don't think it'll affect it too much. Got the same thing over here. So all in all, pretty sure in my mind the suspension is all done besides welding. So I'll, like I said a minute ago, I'll go ahead and order the axle shafts, get those in place, I'm going to pull the rear end housing out, do the finish welding on that, take it to the car wash, and clean it out really good, pull the bearings out, put new seals in it, put new bearings in it, and then load the center section back in, so when I get the axles we can stuff those in. So that'll be the end of this section, and hopefully we'll get it moved over here in the next 2 to 3 weeks to the big shop, and we can start with fuel lines, brake lines, everything from the back to the front, maybe even mock up some exhaust system and start putting things in place and working our way forward. So next time I get some good progress, I'll show you.